We're going to get started with taking a look at our advanced search function. This is an absolute continuation of what we were talking about last time. So in our last session, we looked at simple searches or ad hoc searches or full text basic searches. They're essentially our way of getting into a search mode for this. Now, simple searches and versus advanced search. With a simple search, it's considered an unfiltered search. We're trying to bring back as many results as we possibly can. It's giving you back the most information that's available to you from the search. It uses the FTS or the full text search mode, and as we saw last time, full text search has some interesting things to it, such as dropping out noise words, not worrying about capitalization. So it's a really powerful search tool to bring back as many results as quickly as we possibly can. When we run a simple search, we assume that the next thing you want to do is refine your results. So we bring you back a big pool of results, and then we're going to trim them down. Our advanced search, though, offers us the ability to filter our searches. So we can add up to 8 different layers of filter onto the search in order to strain out the results and get exactly what you need. So it's not just one layer of search, it's multiple layers of search that we can have at once. It refines searches by metadata or administrative properties. So we can use our metadata now to leverage our search, to alter our search, but we can also use things that you may not have thought about searching about, such as who owns the document, or when the document was added to the system, or what its workflow status is. Information that's essential and vital about the document, but nothing that you're actually putting into there like a metadata field. We refine our results, and then we can display all of that content onto there to make sure we can find what we're after. So again, we're looking at ways of refining not only how we're finding our documents, what documents are coming out, but also how they're being displayed. So we can see metadata within our advanced searches. We're going to touch on a lot of these subjects today. Before we get into our live demo, I want to take a moment just sort of here in a safe space about what the advanced search bar looks like. And if you've used FileHold search before, you've seen this bar. This is the advanced search bar. It's at the top of our search screen when we're looking at it. And there's some components here that I just want to quickly highlight so that we know what they're going to do when we see them in the field. We're going to start here with our first one, which is our search criteria type, is what this is called. This is the first area, and the way I always think about this is how we're searching for documents within the system. So it chooses what area of FileHold is going to be searched. So file or metadata is our starting point, and that's the broadest possible thing. So it could be text or metadata. It could be a system administrative value, such as who owns the document, the data added to FileHold, etc. Could be a schema, could be a metadata. So it's really where we're going to start to direct our search to exactly what we're trying to find for our content. Our second one here is our search operator, and this is how we're going to activate the search. Now, this is sort of how FileHold searches, but it's really using the FTS versus other modes, such as the database. The database is a way of searching without using the FTS, so ignore document text, just look in the document's metadata, and then apply different rules to it. While the FTS filters words, the database does not. So we're going to treat our searches differently when we're searching using a database. We can also use a function like equals. So instead of finding a word generally, we're looking for a word specifically or a phrase specifically or something where it is the value that we're searching for. We can look for is blank. An empty metadata field is also a result, so we can also use that as a search term. We can use this from a list, pulling information from a list of selectables. So if you're doing a drop-down, this will change the next section into a drop-down list when we choose from a list. So our next section over here is our search value. This is where we're actually going to be entering in our search mode. When we're doing our simple searches, it's a text bar. So it's what we're actually going to be searching for, it's what we're typing into the system. Now this changes based on the search criteria and the operator. So as the criteria or the operator change, so does the value that we're looking into here. So right now it's a text box, but it could also be a date picker. It could be a drop-down menu. It could be a checkbox. So there's different ways of the user, whoever's doing the search, of actually finding those values within the document. This little button over here adds a search criteria or adding a row or filter. In other words, adding another row to this. This is when I say we can have up to 8 levels of filter onto this. That's what I mean. Each one of these would be an AND statement. So if I clicked that, I'd have a second row, and then I'm saying whatever this is, and whatever the next row is, and whatever the row is after that. So the goal is to try to get less results as they come through. And we're going to see that as we start working with the search today. So we're going to get to know the adding the search criteria. We can also, once we have a second row into there, we can also remove the search criteria. So strip the bars back in case we have too much of a filter going on. Now, below this are some search options, and those are all these checkboxes that run across. Our first one here is a Boolean search. I touched briefly on Boolean searches last time, but this is where we can start to use Boolean search logic as far as terminology goes. So this allows us to do things like use the word and. So if I can put two things into here with an and in between. Now, and would be treated by the FTS as a noise word. But if we're using a Boolean search, it's now going to treat that and as a Boolean term. And so word 1 and word 2 equals our search results. So it's making it a more powerful search. It also lets us do something like or. So, this word or that word to expand our results through. This is the only way to do an or search is within the line, within that one set of logic. We could do with slash and a number. So within a certain number of words of that. So, policy within 2 of decision. So I can see any of those 2 words that might happen to link together. They'll be then drawn together. But if I had policy in one part and decision 2 pages later, it would ignore that because it's not within 3 words of that value. Not, so it excludes. So this, not that. And not this and not that. So I'm doing those 2 parts put together. We can also use some punctuation Boolean. We touched on those last time. An asterisk, a wildcard. So anything following that, anything after the asterisk can be safely ignored. So it acts as a wildcard. Question mark for a single character value. The difference between police and policy. So POLIC. Question mark would find both police and policy when using Boolean, or quotation marks in order to make a phrase. That's why I've done quotation marks X there. Now, you don't necessarily need to invoke a Boolean search in order to use the punctuation Boolean, but it's nice to know that you can still use them while they're there. The next 2 are sort of related together, which is include. So this expands out what's going to be searched for. By default, all FileHold searches exclude the archive, so older non-living documents go to the archive, and prior versions of documents to focus on current documents and working documents. So it's your active library, it's your current version and the active library. So we're deliberately trying to make sure that we're not overextending the number of documents that are going into there. Now, with include, we get another, we also have search using historical metadata value. And it's kind of related to the same thing as include. And this is where it looks for present and prior values in the metadata for the current version of the document. So if someone's changed a metadata value, we can still search that using the historical metadata fields because that is still in the FileHold database, which is still in SQL in there, ready for us to access. Now, if you want to find historical value in current and prior documents, we're going to want to check both of these. So include all document versions, and search using historical metadata values now shows you any edits that may have happened to a metadata field in the lifespan of that document. And then finally, we have our save icon over here. For those of you who don't know what that symbol is, it's a diskette. If you do know what that diskette symbol is, just make sure you get lots of sleep because we're all getting up there in age. With that diskette icon, you can save your search options. So whatever of these checkboxes are searched will then be executed whether you're doing a simple search or an advanced search. It's going to save those options for you. The big advantage of that is it means that when the next time you run that simple search, you could include all document versions if that's important to you. But this is not a saved search. We will talk about saved search in our next session. This just saves the options, not the values that you're searching for. Perfect. So with that, let's hop into the live demo and actually take a much deeper dive into our search function. So I'm going to bring up my FileHold desktop application. There we are. And now we're going to take a look at the search function as we normally would. So last time we just came over here to search and we entered in our simple search full text basic query. Now, if I want to go immediately into an advanced mode, I could just come over here and click Show Advanced. And this shows our 3 sections here for our search coming across. I could have also come up top to here and typed a value in, and that would have put me into an advanced search mode. Same thing if I right-click the library location, and I'll show you more of that later on. But for here, I've got my 3 sections, and let's start changing how our advanced search works before we run our first search. We're going to open up our first one here and take a look at our different options. There's essentially two halves to our screen here. Oops, sorry, I just clicked off there for a second. There's two halves to this. Everything that's above this line, so you see this line here that's in the center, everything above this line is administrative information that FileHold is storing about your document. So for example, who owns the document, or what its workflow status is, or how big is the file, or is the document checked out. So each of these are not things that you directly can edit. So you can't, for instance, go into a document and say, I declare this document owned by somebody else. If you're an administrator, you could change the document owner. And that's a different function. You're actually changing the document owner, and then that information would be reflected here. Everything that's below this line, however, this is your schema, this is your metadata. So each one of these is one of my schemas. So if I look, for instance, at my bill of lading, and then these are my important metadata fields that I have that relate to that bill of lading. Here's my literature, here's my important fields that relate to that particular schema. You define your own schema, you define your own metadata, you determine what's going to be important to you so that you can then put together the system, the library of information that you need. So this lets me drill in specifically on either a schema or on a particular metadata field. And we're going to start with that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click my document schema. In this case, I've chosen literature and I run my search. Now FileHold goes throughout my entire system and it brings any documents forward that have the document schema of literature. Now I'm going to stay today in this default view. You can see I've got a default view going on here, but I could make a custom view. I could have a saved view up here that I want to call in for myself, so I can always use that whenever I want to. But today specifically, I'm going to stay in this simplified default view. You can set your own default for your searches that you get the same information. And when we come back to this in our next session, we start saving our searches, we can start saving views built into that. And that's going to be really, really important for that. So now that we've got our first thing into this, we could now add another line of search criteria if we wanted to. So we could put a whole new line of search into this. So now I could say, show me in these documents where I might have a particular word. So I type in my value, I hit enter. Now we've done two layers of search. Search one, show me all documents where the document schema equals literature, and show me all documents where the file or metadata value has bodkin, either in the document's text or metadata. And it shows me my 3 documents that come out here. So again, I'm able to do a search of my entire system with very quickly using these 2 filters. So it's a fairly aggressive filter, but again, I'm not overreaching for those particular values. Let's just remove this line. So again, I can remove that search line if I want to, the negative. We'll go back to our original line here. Rather than doing document schema, I could also drill down on a metadata field. So if I go to my document schema dropdown, go to my field, so let's go to literature, and then choose, for instance, a title, I can now use this with an FTS search to search for titles. So if I type in Hamlet, for example, we run our search through and it's going to show us all of our values where the word Hamlet appears within the title metadata field. Now that's not the document name field. Remember, if I right click on any one of these, and let's go to our metadata and file properties, open that up on the side. And here's my title for this, and we can see the word Hamlet appears right in there. So I've executed my search, drilling down to a metadata field. So this is a very specific search. Now, you're probably not storing the plays of Shakespeare in your system. I appreciate that. Don't know why. It's a good use for it, but that's fine. But let's say you're storing an invoice. I can search for an invoice number there. I can search for, a purchase order number. I can search for a vendor name. Those are specific metadata fields that I might want to take a deep dive into to be able to focus what my search is looking for. So this is our simplest version of a search. I have a few other things I can do here. Like, let's go over to my invoices, and we'll see that down here, I've got 3 different dates. These are my retention policies on my invoices. So because I have a retention policy that says, convert these to record after 60 days, archive them after 2 years, and delete them after 7 years, I can use those as searchable dates as well. So again, it's an example of storing something that's only in that schema, but relates to those documents. At the top here is a magic field. This field is common metadata fields. When we attach a metadata field to a schema, That metadata field is now, any values into there can now be searched for within that schema, and that's great. But what happens when we share that schema with more than one document type? So here, for example, I have title that's used in potentially in more than one schema. So if I want to make sure that I'm not missing an iteration of Hamlet, I could use title here and run my search. Now, I might come back with the exact same results because maybe I don't have any documents that extend beyond that. But here, I've actually been very generalized. I'm saying this metadata field, but I don't care what schema it's being used in. Now, notice this is not a list of all of my metadata fields. I don't have everything into here. It's a list of anything where a metadata field is used by more than one schema. And it's a great way to quickly find documents that I might happen to be looking for. All right. So these are our metadata, our schema and metadata related searches. Now we can change how these searches are running by changing our search filters up here. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to keep in title. If I open up my drop down here, I have some different options. So contains an FTS, part of my FTS using FTS search logic. So capitalization is ignored, exact values are not matched, and I can use Boolean search logic for that. Contains in DB, I'm not able to use Boolean search logic in the same way, although I can use wildcards, so that's allowed, but I can't use a Boolean operator, so the Boolean search would not work with contains in database. Capitalization is not as much of a factor here, so if I want to make sure that I'm looking for something capitalized, I want to make sure that capital is in there. I've seen different results on depending on what mode you're searching in, so I want to be cautious with that one. We also have antonyms here, so I can say does not contain an FTS, so show me anything where the title is not Hamlet, and I can run that in my search, and I'm going to come back with a lot of documents because I have probably more documents that aren't Hamlet than are Hamlet, and that's why I get my 220 documents that come back there in my result. I can say does not contain in database, so again doing that antonym search there. Equals, I have an exact value, so if I say equals and run that same search I did before, how many documents do I have? I have two of them because I have two documents where when I click on this, and we take a look at the metadata for it, it's going to tell me the title is Hamlet, and that's it. So that means these two documents are just named Hamlet, and that's what it brought me back, is that was an equals onto that. If there's anything anywhere else, if Hamlet just happens to be a word that's used, it's not brought back for me. Again, notice lowercase here, so I'm not having to worry about my capitalization on that. And then finally is blank. We use is blank when we don't have a value in that particular metadata field. Now, if it's a required metadata field, then is blank would not really be effective here because I can't add a document in without it. But here, I've got an example of a dummy document that I put into the system, probably doing a demo for someone, and it looks like I added this in with no title in place. So without a title, I was able to add this in. By the way, here's an example of a metadata field that has more than one meaning. I'm using titles of plays, but here I'm using title as this is being used for a contract. So it's a title of contract, who actually owned a property. So again, that's why I like being very specific thing. I would probably say, literary title if I wanted to be more specific about it. But for my demo system, this is perfectly valid. All right, so that's our schema and metadata way. Now, if I change what I'm searching for, so let's instead of this go to invoice date to use as an example, then my modifiers over here change as well. The FTS goes away. When I'm searching for a date, I'm searching only in metadata. So we're not searching as a text field anymore. So we can disregard any text results that come back from my searches. And instead I get equals as my first one. That's my default for this. Does not equals anything that isn't that date in the list. If I have multiple dates, I can use this and it allows me to choose from the multiple dates that I'm putting into there. So it allows me to expand out my search. Between, I can use two dates for this one. So I can use a start date and an end date. And any document that falls on or between those two dates, that comes back as a result for me. Before or after, before or equal to or after or equal to, done as a greater than or lesser than sign. So again, those. These down here though, I love these three and I use these actually quite a lot. At least is an X number of days older than now. So if I was to say, show me everything that's 180 days older than now, because I want to roughly look at a set period of time, I can run that through and shows me all of the invoices in my system before a certain date. If I use no older than and use that same value, it's going to flip that. So I have 31 results that way. If I go to this way, so no older than 180 days from now, I get these 7 documents back. So it's a great way to look back for a set period of time based on the number of days moving back. Really effective when it comes to something like an invoice. So, I'm looking for all of my invoices that are no more than 30 days old. I want to see just the last month's worth of activity, and I can grab that quickly. Any date field allows me to use the no older than, at least older than, and then of course is blank, just in case I have an invoice date field which is blank on a document. And here I can run this through and I have no search results. No search results is a result. I like this because this lets me confirm I don't have any invoices in my system that have a blank invoice date. Hey, if you want to do a little bit of quality control and spend some time and make sure you're not missing essential fields, here's a great way to do that, because now I can pick up the information from documents that I happen to be missing, and I can make sure that my documents aren't missing key information. Maybe when I first added these invoices in, the invoice date was not a required field. Now it is a required field. Do I have any documents that aren't in compliance? Because maybe I have a retention policy that I'm using to bake that onto there, and allows me to grab that really quickly out of the system and pull this as basically a standing report. And if I was to save that search, I could recall it later, but we'll talk about that in the next session. So I'm not going to worry about that for now. All right, let's head back over to here and let's take a look at one other example of this, which is in the list. And I'm just trying to remember if I have a drop down one here. Let me see if my vendor name, I don't remember if this is a drop down or not. I don't believe it is. No, it's not. And of course, now I forget that it's something I should have looked up before I got started here today. Type of contract, that'll be an example. So here I can choose in the list. Because the value that I've done here for my metadata field is a dropdown, I can open up my dropdown here and then choose one of my values for the dropdown. So this allows me to pull an item and say, show me all types of contracts that are commercial, and run that search. And if I have any commercial contracts, I don't actually know if I have or not, but it's an example of how I could search for that one particular field. And if I was using different kinds of contracts, maybe I have, a different schema for my contracts, then my type of contract metadata field would let me search multiple contracts at a time. And I have internal and external contracts, but the type of contracts are different. Again, you can set up your schema however you want. This is a way of filtering and bringing those documents together. All right, let's go up to our top section here, because this is where things get a bit more deep, and this is something that everybody's system is going to have. And then I'll show you a couple of tricks about how we can set up our searches for ourselves to make things easier. I'm gonna start with the first one up here, full text search. This is actually where we came in. If I choose file or metadata, I'm back to exactly where I started. This is a simple search expressed as an advanced search. Show me all documents where the file or metadata has a value that's contained within the FTS. I can then filter that and say file only. So now I'm no longer doing that same general search. Now I'm saying just look in the file, look in the text of the document. Or I can say look in the metadata only for a document. We also have a raw query. Raw queries ignore noise words. So noise words are picked up this time. So we're not using that concept anymore. And they are a much deeper, richer search. They're also hugely expensive from computational views. Usually raw queries are only available to system admins. So if you open up your full text search over here and don't see raw query, everything's working exactly as it's supposed to. Now we can add raw queries to other users. Your system administrator can do that through the preferences. However, it does mean that if too many people are running raw queries, we can overly burden the system and you might find a slowdown in your search results coming back. We don't want that. We're not saying you can't have it. We're just saying we're trying to avoid that. And that's why raw query might be hidden from you. Don't worry, you're not a bad person. We just want to make sure that we're not overtaxing the system. But if you're a library administration, if you're a library and information sciences kind of person, or if you're somebody who really knows your Boolean search terms and you want to really use raw queries, ask your system administrator and see what you can get access to. They're extremely powerful. Document name, just like it says, whatever the name of the document is that's stored in FileHold, this is what will be used. If you're using naming conventions, such as renaming a document from its metadata, then this is less effective at this point because a document name, it's probably going to be easier for you to search your metadata in the end, probably more exacting too. If you're bringing over legacy documents though, document name can be extremely useful because you can find information in there. Big warning about this, and that's that if I'm searching for the document name, I'm going to show you an example of this right here. Let's search for the word Hamlet using the document name. We saw documents in there before with Hamlet, and I'm missing one of them from here because, oops, I put a Boolean term into there, but I didn't run a Boolean search, so it's fine. I've got 4 documents back, but I know there's another one into there, and I'm going to show you why that is. Instead of this, I'm going to put a wildcard in front of it, and I'm going to run that search again. Here's why. Here's our 2 documents down here because they have an underscore in them. Underscores out of the box are not treated as punctuation. They're treated as text. So when the value went into the search index, the value that went in for this document name was Hamlet. For this one, it was the word shadows. Of and the are considered noise words, so they're in the database, but they're not in the FTS. Mind was added, ghosts and the are both noise words. Haunting of noise word, Hamlet. So again, these words I'm hitting on, those are the ones that got added into the FTS. And then the 2 and the 1 have dashes in between, so they would have each been added in individually. Down here, the word bloom would have been added and then a comma, but the word that's in the FTS for this is Harold underscore Hamlet. That's the word because the underscore is treated as a text value. There is a limit, I believe it's 32 characters to a word. So something, if this was, for example, um, if we were to take our shadows underscore of underscore the underscore mind underscore dash underscore etc. If this was all an underscore, we probably wouldn't have added that word into the FTS because it's too long. So we want to be careful of using underscores. I know the default in our naming convention use an underscore between each. I try to change those all the time to dashes because then they're treated as punctuation and they're not treated as an underscore characteristic for it. So it's a much better way to search for the content. So I just wanted to flag that because I find underscores really appear in document names, especially from legacy software where you're bringing over a bunch of your Windows documents and you've had some computer people who insist on underscoring every space that's in their documents. Oftentimes for extremely valid reasons. I'm not saying they shouldn't have done that. I'm saying there's a good reason to not use underscores in your file names if you can help it. There is a way in the search index to change how that underscore is treated. So instead of being treated as text, it's treated as punctuation. That's a manual activity. You have to do that through a managed option, and then you'll be forced to reindex the FTS in order to make that effective. So if you want to look at that, you can find that information in our knowledge base or email us and let us know if you're interested in doing that. We can give you some guidance on how to do that, but I promise you it is in the KB and it's something your system administrator can help you out with. Good. Let's go to our next drop down here. We've got person, in this case, owned by me or owned by somebody else. So if I say owned by somebody else, this instantly turns into a drop down because now I'm choosing the user. So I can choose, for example, Tom out of here. And now Tom test user, I'm looking for the documents that Tom happens to own in the system. So I can see Tom owns these 2 documents, and that's great. So I can get reference to that anytime I need to. By the way, there's also an example where I can use the does not equal. It's a great filter here for this. This search that I just ran right here, I would probably never do because this is kind of a useless search. But if I was to add a filter into this, I could say, show me all documents that that Tom doesn't own that has to do with Tom's pet project, right? So, I can use the word dragon into here because I know he's working on Project Dragon. Now I can exclude all Tom's dragon documents and find his. Better do a metadata field search for that, but you understand what I'm saying here. So this isn't a particularly useful one-off search, but it's a great filter to add to an existing search. Same thing as we go down here for filing date when the document was added into FileHold. It's creation when the document was last modified, which is the creation date until it's changed. Then it gets updated in the date last modified. When it was approved or when it was reviewed. So if I'm looking for workflow processes for reviews or approvals, I can use that there. Workflow status, I can go by approval status. So for those who don't know, 100% of your documents in FileHold have an approval status. Those approval statuses are not submitted for approval, hasn't gone through workflow yet, pending approval, currently undergoing workflow, approved, finished workflow, and good to go, not approved, finished workflow, and rejected or approval postponed cannot be completed at this time. So 100% of your documents have one of those statuses at least. So this is a great way of saying I want to see all documents that are pending approval and doing that would show me everything in the system that hasn't gone through a workflow. So now I'll add a filter into this and say, show me all of my invoices that haven't gone through an approval status. Right now, I'm doing a fairly logical search. I don't have any. That means that all of my workflows have been completed that are currently underway. Maybe instead of pending, I want to see not submitted. So now show me the ones that have yet to go through workflow. All right, it's going to give me a list of those. So here's my 36 documents. I can see some of these are a bit old, so let's add another filter into this, and let's use the file date, and we'll use the creation dates when they were added into the system. Or I can go down here to invoices, and I could choose the invoice date, and then I could say, no older than 90 days. So I just want the last 3 months. If it's more than 3 months old, then I'm going to leave this to somebody else. What I want to do is find this one invoice that got missed because it didn't go through an approval process. Now, at the same time, I could also say, show me the ones in that same period that were approved. And no results came back because nothing in that time period was approved into there. They're older documents for me at this point. So again, this is how we can build these searches out based on logical criteria. We're asking the question, and then we're building on our search to match. All right, let's get rid of those two filters. We're going to go back over here to our approval status, going down to our next one down here, which is library location. Just that, where is this in the library? So if I was to say the search that I want to run today is going to be found over in my literature cabinet, I'm now going to limit my search to literature. If I then click search here, it's going to show me all of the contents of that literature cabinet regardless of where it is. So I might be looking through pages and pages of documents, but it's a great first point to add a filter into that later. So if I was then to add this in and then search for the word bodkin, I'm now going to come back and show a more limited pool of documents because I don't have the same breadth that I did just a moment ago. Again, I'll get rid of that second filter. Let's go back over to library location. We've got our document log. So any actions do in the system, these are actions that FileHold might do. So, initiating a courier transmission, checking in a document, archiving it, adding it to a virtual folder, approving a workflow on it. All of these are actions that I can then query against this. I don't see this used heavily by users, but it's nice to know that it's here because it's a great way to quickly get some of that information into there. We've also got dates that we could use for that as a trigger. And then finally, our special fields I want to quickly review. So folder name, we use folder name, which is different than library location. So library location is one specific object. I'm looking for folder A, or I'm looking for folder 2026. Whereas down here, folder name treats the folder name as text. And that's useful because if I have multiple different departments and they're all doing different levels of chronological filing, a search by the folder name 2026 limits my search to only documents in folders where the name is 2026 that I can see. File size done in K, file type. So if, for example, if I'm looking for only JPEGs or I'm looking for, a text file, or a docx file or whatever I want to find, I can always use this in order to do that kind of search filter. That's what I use a lot because I tend to, I'm looking for a PowerPoint and I know it's got this word in it, but I can't remember where exactly it is in the library. It lets me, quickly drill down my searches. Document ID. So every document gets its own ID, document control number or version control numbers if you're using those. Whether or not it has a markup. So if you're using a level 2 viewer in FileHold and you're marking up a document, that's where we could use that. It has a link to another document. That's a manual link. So we can definitely draw two documents together. We've got our document formats, whether it's a document or a record, I can use that. External system name, external system ID. This is something that's new to this version of FileHold, and what this does is allow me to search based on an external system value that I'm putting into this. Not really something that we're training on at this point because this is more on the programming side of things. It's very useful in that end, so we're not sort of leaning on those ones for now. Good. So those are all of our elements of search. Now there's a big thing in here, and I apologize, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I'm just going to bring it out now. Your search results will be limited to what you have access to. There is no function in FileHold that's going to bypass your permissions within the system. So if you as a user are only allowed to see, for example, some parts of the library, so let's expand my library here. So if I'm allowed to see literature, but I'm not allowed to see contract management, then my searches would exclude the contract management area. If I'm not allowed to see, for example, the literature schema, then I'm not going to bring back any of those results back. This is important because some people, when they search, they say, I don't have any of these documents. Maybe what I can definitely say is you can't see any of those documents. In my case, I'm a system administrator. There are no documents that can hide from me. So my search results are absolute. Yours might be different because if you were to search my system, you might not have the same level of access or permission. So that's always taken into account when we're building out our searches, is that what you're allowed to see is going to can sometimes affect your results. Another thing I want to point out is this idea of so I'm going to choose library location here. I'm going to I haven't put a value in, that's okay. I'm going to put an extra level of filter into here, and I'm going to open up this first drop down again. Notice what's missing from my list. I can't use library location a second time. We can only use our filters once because that filter could create a situation where it's impossible to have a document. Here's what I mean by that. If I say, show me all documents that are in the plays folder over here, and show me all documents that are in my one folder over here, I will automatically come back with 0 documents. And that's because no document can be in 2 places. Oh, I might have documents with a similar name. I appreciate that, but that's not the search that we've done there when we say that. This is an and statement in between each of these. So if I create a situation where I'm asking it to show me all documents in one location and all documents in the other location, my results must be 0. So to make sure we can't create these kind of double negatives where we have an impossible search, we don't allow you to use that search filter more than once, with a singular exception. And that exception is where we started off with today, our file or metadata search. I can have as many of these as I would like. This is where I can have my 8 levels of these kind of search. But remember, putting a word in each one of these lines is the same thing as putting 5 words in one line, because it's when we're using the FTS, we're not searching for phrases until we use those quotation marks. We're searching for individual words in those documents. So there's no difference from to be or not to be, which by the way would be a filtered search. So I wouldn't want to use the FTS for that, but never mind. But if I was to do that search as versus to be or not to be in a single line, it's the same amount of value that I'm running into my searches over here. So this is the mechanics of our advanced search, our ability to get into these. There's 2 other ways we can get into our advanced search. When I started this off here, I clicked on search, and then it just gave me this simple search. So I had to click over here and say show advanced, and then it gave me this. There's 2 other ways to get into these advanced searches. The first one is to right-click a location of the library. So if I right-click over here onto Shakespeare and say run a search in my Shakespeare folder, and now I'm going to do a filter onto this, and I'm going to say show me all documents where the literature is, let's say the class of work, and I want this to be in the list. So I'm going to make this a poem as a selection, run that as a search, and this should show me all of the poetry that I happen to have in this particular container over here. Now I notice when I do this that my 3 documents here appear to be in the plays folder. So they've been misfiled. So let's just select these. So I'm going to grab my first one, grab my second one, grab my third, right click onto these, and I'm going to copy or move, and I'm going to move these to a different location. So let's move them. I could have done this through drag and drop, but I'm doing this manually here. And I'm going to move these to my poems folder and say OK. The document should get moved. And now if I run this search again, we still get our poems, but now they're in the right location. So if I'd right clicked here and done that same search, so right click on that area, run my search, open up my filter, let's go down to literature, class of work, in the list, poem, search, no results. And that's what I hope to see, because I don't want anything in the wrong container. This helps me to error check that as I go. So there's an example of a second way to get into that advanced search. First way was click search and then click the advanced. Second way is to right click a library location to start an advanced search with the library location already filled out. Our third way of actually getting into an advanced search is to use the full text basic query up here. And instead of typing a value into this, we could use this button here on the end, which just clicks this and it runs an advanced search and puts us into a mode where we can start an advanced search. Now, while this is true, I want to caution on one thing, because when I use this, it puts us into here with a blank field, and now I need to move my mouse over and come onto this. If I know the value that I'm searching for, I should actually start up here and type that in. So if I type in Rosencrantz and then run my search by hitting enter, it's run my search and immediately puts me into that advanced search mode. The advanced search mode means now I am ready to filter my search anyway. So if I'm going to modify this because I'm looking for something in the document text or something, might as well start with this rather than just click on the advanced search. But again, your mileage may vary. They both work as ways to get into it. So food for thought on that. So this is advanced search. It's absolutely one of the best ways to find documents in here because it lets me find the biggest net that I can pull over top for my documents. So please start to get to know and use advanced search. I think it's a great way to work with the software.